The early 1960s was an angry and fearful decade. The Cold War was at its tipping point, civil rights protesters were being violently countered, and the president was assassinated. At this time, though, the Democratic Party wasn't fully in on battling racial discrimination in America at all. JFK was concerned for civil rights and called it a moral crisis, but he was never aggressive in his civil rights stances. In 1960, the South voted entirely Democratic, and that gave JFK his victory. The Democratic Party still had a firm hold on the segregated South. In the 1960s, the last time the South voted Republican was 1872. But like Teddy, LBJ was also a champion of progressivism after JFK's assassination.
All Americans must have the privileges of citizenship, regardless of race. And they are going to have those privileges of citizenship, regardless of race.
He passed the Civil Rights Act, pushed for healthcare reform, gun control, educational reform, and a clean environment. These progressive policies in fighting segregation alienated Southern Democrats, and in 1964, for the first time in 88 years, the South voted almost entirely for the Republican candidate Barry Goldwater. Even the Democratic governor of Alabama, George Wallace, had supported Goldwater. In Wallace's early career as a judge, he was one of the most liberal judges regarding race. In his 1958 gubernatorial race, the NAACP endorsed him, but he lost. After this loss, he decided to run an aggressively pro-segregationist campaign. When someone asked him why he changed his stance, he said, "You know, I try to talk about good roads, good schools, and all these things that have been part of my career, and nobody listened. And then I began to talk about and they stomped the floor." He successfully ran for governor of Alabama in 1962. In his inauguration, he dedicated most of his speech to the defense of segregation.
And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
As governor, he blocked the entrance of a high school to prevent black students from entering and gained national notoriety because of it. It's shocking to watch him talk about politics. It's almost a copy-paste of what Republicans say today.
Yes, sir. I've said something similar to that. When somebody goes out and begins to loot and burn a building down, which endangers the health and safety of everybody, that's a good way to stop it.
After 1964, Wallace left the Democratic Party and ran for president in the newly formed American Independent Party. He ran to bring back segregation and dressed himself up as a working man. In my mind, he knew he could talk his way into becoming governor. Why couldn't he talk his way into becoming president? By this time, the Vietnam War had backfired drastically. Thousands of young men were dying in a war they didn't want to fight in, and LBJ was to blame. It was clear to him that if he kept running with the baggage of the Vietnam War on his back, he would lose, so he stepped out of the race.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
His vice president Hubert Humphrey took up the reins on campaigning, but it wasn't working. He was getting crushed in the primaries. Eugene McCarthy won first place with 2.9 million votes. Bobby Kennedy took second place with 2.3 million votes, and Hubert Humphrey took third place with 166,000 votes. Humphrey was the most unpopular candidate, but that didn't matter. He was the vice president, so the DNC chose him anyway.
I proudly accept the nomination of our party.
The clear disregard for Democratic voters' preferences and the escalation of the Vietnam War brought a series of protests to the DNC. Police countered them aggressively and violently. This gave the Democratic Party its least energetic and most unpopular moment in history. Back then, segregation was popular equally among Democrats and Republicans in the South. Southern Democrats overwhelmingly supported George Wallace, and when the election was due, it showed. George Wallace garnered over 9 million votes, and all the deep Southern states supported him. The Democratic Party had 12 million fewer votes than in 1964, and the Republican Party had gained over 4 million votes. Richard Nixon won 3-1 electoral votes and became the 37th president of the United States. Later in life, Wallace said he regretted his anti-segregation stances and wanted forgiveness, but I don't believe him or care. He's a politician and an open grifter. LBJ was too. Before he became president, he openly supported segregation and voted for policies that hurt the communities he's now known for aggressively supporting. George Wallace was a garbage person. He hid his wife's cancer diagnosis from her, have her run for governor when his term limits were up, and she died not even a year after winning. He ran for governor again, got shot, ran for president again, and retired in 1986. Since 1960, the South has only voted Democratic once. George Wallace lived to do and say anything to get as much power as he could. Whoever he had to hurt, whoever he had to sacrifice, he did. He made America a worse place and re-emboldened the South's resistance to progress more than ever. 1968 was the last time third parties won any states. In 1992, Ross Perot ran a convincing and energetic campaign and won nearly 20 million votes, but because of our winner-take-all system, he didn't win a majority in any states and received no electoral votes. In the 2000 election, third parties caused Al Gore's loss. He lost the deciding state, Florida, by just 537 votes. If Ralph Nader had dropped out or not even run in Florida, his near 100,000 votes certainly would have gone to Al Gore, and we would have had an Al Gore presidency. Third parties have been taken less and less seriously and are now just strategic pawns. The RFK Jr. campaign received funding from GOP megadonors because his campaign was designed to take more votes away from the Democratic Party. When it became clear he was leeching off more votes from Trump, he dropped out. Same for Jill Stein. She knows her party is benefiting Republicans, but that's where her money comes from, the GOP and Russia. She can go on TV and say progressive things, accurately call out the genocide against Palestinians, but refuse to call Putin a war criminal, because she knows that's where her paycheck is coming from. She knows she will lose, but as long as she took as many votes away from the Democratic Party, she knows she did what she was paid to do. You can call my attitude against third parties very biased, and that's because it is, because our system is. We can't break the system by voting third parties, and we shouldn't risk more people's lives by throwing our votes away, and third parties being paid by our adversaries pretending to be our friends. I don't like that our system is this way, and I don't want third parties to be constant losers, and I want them to keep advocating and try winning at the state level, where it's genuinely possible. If we want third parties to win, we will have to change our voting system, and that's a long road ahead of us. We'll need candidates who are open to change, not candidates who are closed off to change. The best thing you can do for change right now is to vote. Make sure you register to vote and head to the polls tomorrow on November 5th. I know I will.